Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! In the intense beams of light, the scene was set. A spotlight illuminated the guitar's rich mahogany surface. The anticipation hung in the air as a skilled musician's fingers, rough yet nimble, were poised to pluck and strum, ready to unleash a symphony and capture hearts with the very first chord. Russell took a deep breath, his chest expanding beneath the fitted black t-shirt that had become his uniform. The audience waited, a sea of expectant faces swimming before him in the darkness beyond the stage. He strummed, the familiar notes ringing out across the venue. It was a song he'd played 1,000 times before, one that had propelled him from dingy bars to respectable clubs. His rich baritone filled the air, weaving through the melody with practiced ease. But something felt off. The words, once infused with passion, now tasted stale on his tongue. His movements, honed through countless performances, felt mechanical. As he reached the chorus, a realization struck him with the force of a misplaced chord. He was suffocating beneath the weight of his own image. The set ended to polite applause. Russell retreated backstage, his guitar a leaden weight in his hands. He slumped onto a battered couch, running a hand through his close-cropped hair.
Great show, man.
His manager, Mike, clapped him on the shoulder.
Same time next week?
Russell nodded, mustering a weak smile.
Yeah, sure.
Mike's brow furrowed.
You okay? You seemed a little off tonight.
Just tired, I guess. Russell lied, avoiding Mike's concerned gaze. After Mike left, Russell sat in the empty dressing room, staring at his reflection in the smudged mirror. The face that looked back at him was handsome in a rugged way. Strong jaw, 5 o'clock shadow, piercing blue eyes. It was a face that had graced music magazine covers and made fangirls swoon. But in that moment, it felt like a mask, concealing rather than revealing. He closed his eyes, letting his mind wander. In the darkness behind his eyelids, a different image began to form. Soft curves instead of hard angles, flowing fabric instead of restrictive denim, a cascade of hair framing a face alight with joy and freedom. Russell's eyes snapped open, his heart racing. The vision lingered, tantalizing and terrifying in equal measure. He shook his head, trying to dispel the image, but it clung to him like a persistent melody. Over the next few days, the idea refused to let go. It whispered to him as he strummed his guitar in his apartment, its notes mingling with the traffic noise filtering through the windows. It followed him through his daily routines, a constant presence at the edge of his thoughts. Finally, unable to resist any longer, Russell found himself standing in front of a thrift store, its windows displaying an eclectic mix of vintage clothing. His palms were sweaty as he pushed open the door, a small bell announcing his arrival. The shop was a riot of colors and textures. Racks of clothing stretched into the depths of the store, interspersed with shelves laden with knickknacks and accessories. Russell moved through the aisles, his fingers brushing against soft fabrics and sequined surfaces.
Can I help you find anything?
Russell startled at the voice, turning to face a woman with bright purple hair and a kind smile. Her name tag read, Evelyn.
I'm not sure,
Russell admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn's smile widened.
Well, sometimes the clothes find us, not the other way around. Why don't you just browse and see what catches your eye?
Grateful for her understanding, Russell nodded and continued his exploration. His gaze was drawn to a rack of dresses, their vibrant hues a stark contrast to his usual wardrobe of blacks and grays. One, in particular, stood out, a shimmering creation of midnight blue sequins that caught the light with every movement. His hand reached out, almost of its own accord, to touch the dress. The sequins were cool beneath his fingertips, smooth and inviting. Before he could second-guess himself, Russell took the dress off the rack. "Excellent choice." Evelyn appeared at his elbow, startling him again. "Would you like to try it on?" Russell hesitated, his heart pounding. This was his chance to back out, to laugh it off as a joke or a dare. But the sequins winked at him, promising something he couldn't quite name. "Yes," he said, surprised by the steadiness in his voice. "Yes, I would." Evelyn led him to a changing room at the back of the store, drawing the curtain closed behind him. Russell stood in the small space, staring at his reflection in the full-length mirror. The man looking back at him seemed a stranger, uncertain, vulnerable, yet thrumming with an undercurrent of excitement. He undressed slowly, folding his jeans and t-shirt with meticulous care. The dress slipped over his head in a whisper of fabric, cool against his skin. He fumbled with the zipper for a moment before it slid into place. Russell took a deep breath and turned to face the mirror. The transformation was startling. The dress hugged his body in ways he'd never experienced before, accentuating curves he didn't know he had. The sequins caught the light, creating an illusion of movement even when he stood still. For the first time in years, Russell felt a spark of genuine excitement about his appearance. "How's it going in there?" Evelyn's voice came from outside the curtain. "It's amazing," Russell breathed, unable to take his eyes off his reflection. "Would you like to come out and take a look in the big mirror?" Russell hesitated for a moment, then steeled himself. "Okay." He drew back the curtain and stepped out. Evelyn's face lit up with delight. "Oh, honey, you look stunning!" Russell moved to stand in front of the larger mirror at the end of the changing area. The full effect of the dress was even more striking here. He turned slowly, watching the way the sequins shimmered and shifted. "It needs something, though," Evelyn mused. She disappeared for a moment, returning with a pair of black platform heels. "Try these on." The heels added several inches to Russell's height and completely changed his posture. He stood taller, his shoulders back, chin lifted. In the mirror, a new person was emerging, confident, radiant, alive. "What do you think?" Evelyn asked, softly. Russell met her eyes in the mirror. I think I've found myself." Over the next few weeks, Russell threw himself into creating his new persona. He named her Camille, after the French composer Camille Saint-Saëns, whose music had always resonated with him. Evelyn became his confidant and guide, helping him navigate the world of makeup and accessories. In his apartment, Russell practiced walking in heels, his feet aching, but his spirit soaring. He experimented with different looks, filling his closet with an array of dresses, skirts, and blouses. Each new outfit felt like a step closer to something authentic, something true. But it was in his music that the most profound changes occurred. As Camille took shape, so did a new sound. Russell found himself drawn to his keyboard more than his guitar, creating lush orchestral arrangements that were a far cry from his usual acoustic fare. The lyrics flowed more freely, too, touching on themes of transformation, identity, and self-discovery. One evening, As he sat at his keyboard, the sequined dress draped over his frame, Russell had a breakthrough. His fingers danced over the keys, coaxing out a melody that seemed to capture everything he'd been feeling. The words came in a rush, pouring out of him like a river breaking through a dam. As the last notes faded away, Russell sat back, his heart pounding. He'd never written anything like it before. It was vulnerable, honest, and undeniably powerful. In that moment, he knew what he had to do. The next day, Russell called Mike.
"I need to talk to you,"
he said, his voice trembling slightly.
"It's important."
They met at a quiet cafe, tucked away from the bustle of the music scene. Mike arrived first, a look of concern on his face as Russell slid into the seat across from him. "What's going on, Russ? You've been acting strange lately. Is everything okay?" Russell took a deep breath.
"I've been going through some changes," he began. "And I think it's time for a new direction with my music."
Mike leaned forward, his interest piqued.
"What kind of direction?" "I want to introduce a new act,"
Russell said, his words coming faster now.
"A alter ego of sorts. Her name is Camille."
Mike's eyebrows shot up.
"Her?"
Russell nodded, his heart racing.
"Yes, her. I've been exploring a different side of myself, Mike, and I think it's time to bring that to my music."
He pulled out his phone, bringing up a photo Evelyn had taken of him, of Camille, in the sequined dress and heels. Mike's eyes widened as he looked at the image.
"This is unexpected,"
Mike said slowly.
"But I have to admit, there's something compelling about it. Tell me more about this new sound."
Russell launched into an explanation of the music he'd been working on, his excitement building with every word. Mike listened intently, his initial shock giving way to thoughtful consideration.
"It's a risk,"
Mike said finally.
"But if you're passionate about it, I think we should give it a shot. Let's book a small venue, see how it goes over with a live audience."
Relief and exhilaration coursed through Russell. "Thank you, Mike. You won't regret this." The weeks leading up to Camille's debut performance were a whirlwind of preparation. Russell worked tirelessly on his new material, refining the arrangements and practicing his vocals. Evelyn helped him put together the perfect outfit. The midnight blue sequined dress, paired with elbow-length gloves and a cascade of auburn hair extensions. On the night of the performance, Russell stood backstage, his heart pounding so hard he was sure it would burst from his chest. The venue was small, as Mike had suggested, but word had gotten out about the mysterious new act. The crowd buzzed with anticipation.
"You ready?"
Mike asked, giving Russell's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. Russell nodded, unable to speak. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and stepped onto the stage. The spotlight hit him, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, as if in a dream, Camille, began to sing. The music swelled around her, rich and complex. Her voice, usually a deep baritone, soared into a sultry alto. As she moved across the stage, the sequins of her dress caught the light, creating a dazzling display. The audience was silent at first, stunned by the unexpected transformation. But as the first song ended and flowed seamlessly into the second, the energy in the room began to shift. People started to move, swaying to the music. By the third song, the crowd was fully engaged, cheering and calling for more. Camille poured everything she had into the performance. Each song was a revelation, a piece of her soul laid bare for all to see. As she reached the final number, the breakthrough song she'd written that night at her keyboard, she felt something inside her break free. The last note hung in the air, shimmering like the sequins on her dress. For a moment, there was silence. Then the venue erupted in applause, the sound washing over Camille like a wave. She bowed, her heart soaring. As she looked out at the sea of faces, some shocked, some delighted, all impressed, she knew that everything had changed. Backstage, Mike was waiting, his face split by a wide grin.
"That was incredible,"
he said, shaking his head in amazement.
"I've never seen anything like it."
Camille beamed, still riding the high of the performance. "It felt incredible," she said, "like I was finally able to be myself on stage." In the days that followed, word of Camille's debut spread like wildfire through the music scene. Video clips of the performance went viral, sparking heated discussions on social media. Some praised the boldness and originality of the act, while others expressed confusion or criticism. But for every negative comment, there were dozens of supportive ones. People responded to the authenticity of Camille's performance, the raw emotion in her music. Requests for bookings started pouring in, and Mike found himself fielding calls from record labels interested in this exciting new artist. As Camille's popularity grew, Russell found himself navigating a complex new reality. He still performed as himself occasionally, but more and more, he felt drawn to the freedom and expression he found as Camille. The line between the two personas began to blur, with elements of Camille seeping into Russell's everyday life. One afternoon, as he was leaving a meeting with Mike, Russell ran into Jason, a fellow musician he'd known for years. Jason did a double take, his eyes widening as he took in Russell's appearance, the subtle makeup, the flowing shirt, the painted nails.
"Russ? Is that you?"
Jason asked, his voice a mix of surprise and uncertainty. Russell felt a moment of panic, followed by a surge of determination.
"Yeah, it's me,"
he said, squaring his shoulders. "How have you been, Jason?" Jason seemed at a loss for words.
"I've been good. I saw some videos of your new act. It's different."
Russell nodded, bracing himself for criticism. But to his surprise, Jason's face broke into a smile.
"It's amazing, actually,"
Jason continued.
"I've never seen you so alive on stage. It's like you've found a whole new level of artistry."
Relief and gratitude washed over Russell.
"Thanks, man. That means a lot."
As they parted ways, Russell felt a weight lift from his shoulders. If Jason, someone from his old life, could accept and appreciate this change, maybe others could too. The months flew by in a blur of performances, interviews, and recording sessions. Camille's debut album, Metamorphosis, was released to critical acclaim. It topped charts and earned her a devoted following, with fans drawn to the honesty and vulnerability in her music. But with success came new challenges. The constant switching between Russell and Camille began to take its toll. There were days when Russell wasn't sure which version of himself he was supposed to be, where the boundaries between his two identities should lie. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of interviews, Russell found himself sitting in his apartment, staring at his reflection in the mirror. Half of his face was still made up as Camille, while the other half was bare. It was a stark visual representation of the internal struggle he'd been facing. As he sat there, contemplating his divided reflection, a realization began to dawn. The line he'd been trying to draw between Russell and Camille was artificial. They weren't two separate people, but two aspects of the same whole. By trying to keep them apart, he'd been denying a fundamental truth about himself. With trembling hands, Russell reached for his phone and dialed Mike's number.
"Mike,"
he said when his manager answered.
"I need to make a statement. It's time to tell the whole truth."
The press conference was held a week later. Russell stood at the podium, dressed in an outfit that bridged his two personas, a silk blouse paired with tailored trousers, subtle makeup enhancing his features. The room was packed with journalists, all eager to hear what the enigmatic artist had to say.
"Thank you all for coming,"
Russell began, his voice steady despite his nerves.
"I've called this conference to address the questions many of you have been asking about Camille and her relationship to me."
He took a deep breath, then continued.
"The truth is, Camille isn't just a character I play on stage. She's a part of me, a part I've only recently had the courage to embrace and share with the world. For years, I felt trapped by societal expectations of what a man should be, how a man should express himself. Camille gave me the freedom to explore a different side of my identity, to express myself in ways I never thought possible." The room was silent, every eye fixed on Russell as he spoke. "I stand before you today, not as Russell or as Camille, but as both. I am a person who contains multitudes, who doesn't fit neatly into the boxes society tries to put us in. My journey has taught me that authenticity doesn't mean limiting yourself to one way of being, but embracing all the different facets of who you are."
He paused, looking out at the sea of faces before him. Some were nodding in understanding, others looked confused or skeptical. But Russell pressed on, determined to speak his truth.
"I know this might be difficult for some people to understand or accept, but I hope that by sharing my story, I can help others who might be struggling with their own identities. We are all complex, multifaceted beings. Embracing that complexity, rather than trying to fit ourselves into narrow definitions, is what allows us to truly flourish." As Russell finished speaking, the room erupted in a flurry of questions. He answered them as honestly as he could, explaining his journey of self-discovery and the impact it had on his music and his life. In the days that followed, Russell's statement made headlines around the world. As before, reactions were mixed. Some praised his bravery and honesty, while others criticized what they saw as a publicity stunt or a betrayal of his original fan base. But for every negative comment, there were dozens of messages of support. People reached out to share their own stories of self-discovery and transformation, thanking Russell for giving voice to feelings they had struggled to express. As the dust settled, Russell found himself feeling more at peace than he had in years. The burden of hiding, of trying to keep his two selves separate, had been lifted. He was free to be himself, all of himself, both on and off stage. His music evolved once again, blending elements of Russell's earlier style with the lush, emotive sound of Camille. He experimented with his image, sometimes performing in traditionally masculine attire, sometimes in full Camille regalia, and often in looks that blurred the lines between the two. One night, as he stood backstage preparing for a performance, Russell caught sight of himself in the mirror. He was wearing the midnight blue sequined dress that had started it all, but his hair was short, his jawline strong and unshaven. The juxtaposition might have seemed jarring once, but now it felt right. It felt like him. As the opening notes of his first song began to play, Russell stepped out onto the stage. The spotlight hit him, and he began to sing, his voice carrying all the richness of his journey, the struggles, the triumphs, the moments of doubt, and the bursts of joy. And as he looked out at the audience, seeing the faces lit up with understanding and acceptance,
Russell knew he had finally found his true voice. Not as Russell, not as Camille, but as himself. A beautiful, complex harmony of all that he was.
Thanks for watching my girlies. Be sure to check out Patreon for more.